Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Real AI Now podcast, a podcast about real applications of AI in business, brought to you by 2Impulse. Please subscribe our channel and like our podcast episodes. Our podcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. The links for you to subscribe them, you can find them in the video description below. My name is Paulo. I'm going to be your host for today. And today we have Marc Giombetti with us. Welcome, Marc.
Marc
Hi, Marc. Marc is the product manager for Ultra Time Series at 2Impulse. He has over 15 years experience, international experience in IT. Used to work for insurance, over 10 years in the insurance sector with Swiss RE and Allianz. He is passionate about AI. You're going to find out about that today. He has a lot of knowledge in insurance and fintech, cloud, software quality. So we have a lot to talk about today, Marc. Marc is also going to be one of the hosts of our Real AI Now podcast. So you're going to be seeing Marc a lot during this podcast in future episodes. So welcome again, Marc.
Yeah, thank you, Paulo. First, thank you for the invitation for today's session, and also, thank you for including me in the Real AI Now podcast as a host for the next session. So very happy to be here and curious about today's session.
All right, you're welcome and thank you for joining us. The topic of today is automating insurance processes with AI. So we know that AI has a lot of applications, even in insurance. So today, what we would like to focus on is applying AI in automation of insurance processes. So, and that I know that you have a lot of experience with. We both worked on this kind of projects before. So, so before we talk about automating insurance processes, I'd like to ask you a question also for the audience that might not be 100% familiar with the topic is, how does an insurance company work in general, and what are the processes that we're talking about? What is at the heart of it?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question to get started. So I think, if you think about insurance, is basically a risk transfer between a cedent and insurance company. So basically, you want to insure, as for instance, your house, right? You're paying a certain premium to the insurance company, and in the case your house gets flooded or burns down, the insurance company will pay the claims. So this is already tackling certain of the business processes an insurer actually has, right? They need to get the price right of what does your house cost and what would it mean, the house burning down, right? On the second, it's also about, how to settle a claim, right? How do you, for instance, avoid that fraud, right? So how do you correctly reserve as an insurance company the necessary money so that you have money available when certain events like the flooding of a house or the burning of a house happens, right? And if we take a step back and think about insurance companies in general, they have since their existence, always dealt with data, right? So it has always been around how to process data, in essence, to assess a risk, whatever that risk may be.
So trying to summarize what you said, you talked about, first you mentioned risk transfer between a cedent and insurance company. So the cedent is the insured, right? The person, the private person or the company.
Buying insurance, yes.
They have a risk like a car, and there is a risk of losing that, of having a loss, right? And you basically pay somebody else to take over that risk. And that's what an insurance company does. And they do it at scale. And because they do it at scale, and because that's their business model, buying risk from others at scale, right, and making a sort of a margin on that, right?
Yeah.
So
I think
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may. So I think you mentioned a very important concept. So like at scale, right? So
Right.
if you think you are a property and casualty insurer and you have a portfolio of houses, right? It's not going to be an individualized deal, right? You have to offer something for a large amount of clients, right? And this is already the first trigger or thinking point of where can automation come in, right? So if we're speaking about doing something in a repetitive way, this is the first hint of, let's say, automation, right?
And
Second
data.
and data,
right?
exactly, yeah.
Picking up on a couple of the things you said. You talked about different points in the value chain of insurance. You talked about the first stage where you need to underwrite a risk. It's called the underwriting. That's first step.
That's
You
right.
need to sort of put a price on the risk. So what is the size of the loss? If I lose the house, what is the amount of the loss? And then I need, as an insurance company, I need to calculate the probability that something is going to happen to that house. And I make the price of the premium of actually what the insured pays. I price the premium of my insurance coverage based on the calculations that I make that this is going to happen. And I need to make sure that, well, if I'm insuring houses in a city, that I know very well what the risk portfolio of that city is, so that I price accordingly, right? So, and this requires data. I can't just guess every single individual object independently. They are sort of all somehow linked together, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I think there are different types of data when you think about it, right? There is the individual house. And if it's like a normal residential home, right, the insurer won't go there and do a dedicated assessment of that house to gather more data, right? It's going to be statistical data about the portfolio of houses within a certain area. For instance, if you have exposure to flooding or to drought or to any other events which may be particular to that area. If you think about commercial insurance, right, and you want to insure, for instance, a large factory, right, the insurer, of course, will send experts there to gather more data about a particular object. But what is interesting about these two worlds is that actually they both have potential for using artificial intelligence to do automation, right? Because even for, let's say, more dedicated, more larger installation, right, there's often a lot of technical reports and technical assessments. And at some point in time, the insurer needs to decide, do I want to take that risk or don't I? And well, very obviously, the insurer who can be the quickest in making a reasonable offer to a customer is very often the one who gets the deal, right? So there's also an interest at the insurer side of being more effective, of being quick, of being responsive to give the user, who's the client who's buying insurance, a better experience, a better user experience.
Okay, so we are now entering the cool stuff. So the cool stuff means now we took, and I think I'd like to touch the other parts of the value chain of insurance today in the few time that we have. But so we are at the beginning, right? The process of evaluating a risk, pricing it, and then underwriting that risk with a customer, that customer being a private person or company, an organization, even a government sometimes. So what, and if we try and dig a bit deeper and talk about options, possibilities, opportunity for automation in there. Let's so you started talking about risk reports, right? Risk engineering reports, right? So you have, for example, a factory, and typically an insurance company sends an expert company, a third party, to do to do an audit, security audit, for example, of the object and produce an expert report, right? How can this be automated, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, so here we're speaking a bit about the point of sale, right? And very often, in this case, in particular in commercial insurance, you don't or you cannot neglect the brokers, right, and the intermediaries who are very often out there and looking insurance for a particular customer, right? So to get back to the factory, imagine I have this factory. I go to a broker and say, well, please give me the best deal I can get with an insurance company to insure my object, right? So I would already have sent some expert there. There would already be some technical documentation and reports about that particular object. And now the broker, they go to various insurance companies and just, throw the file on the table, right? And ask, well, are you interested?
Me a rate.
Give me a rate. Are you interested in this, right? And then two things happens, right? Like, I mean, somebody at the insurance company will have to sit down and do a so-called desktop analysis. So reading through the documentation the broker has sent them. And this is a very time-consuming process, right? In essence, you want to find the needle in the haystack. Are there maybe any hints within the documents which say, okay, we can't insure this this factory at all? Or are there any hints which will help to do a pricing, right? And then if we're eager to underwrite that risk, the insurance company, they would send their own experts there to do like a dedicated assessment, right? But to get to that point, I think it's very important to say quickly, yes, we should investigate further, or no, it's not for us. And this definitely can be done with AI support, right? So let me give you an example. In industrial factories, right, one question is often how many fire hydrants are there, right? How close are they positioned to each other so that in case of a fire, the fire can be put down in an effective way? This would usually be mentioned in this kind of reports, right? But a person who sits down and needs to read the 200 pages report is going to find it difficult to find that information. It's going to cost them some time. So with so-called, for instance, natural language processing technologies, an AI model can go through this file and on page 37 in the second paragraph find information about fire hydrants, and then hint the expert to, okay, have a look, here is this mentioning.
So you're talking about sort of reviewing or rating a particular document and finding particular things in an automated way. You mentioned natural language processing. So to train such a system, let's say, such systems need to be trained, as far as I know. Now, what is it implied? How much human involvement needs to be there? I mean, if let's say, so I'm an insurance company, I have a risk engineering team, and I want to automate the process, or I want to at least accelerate the process of reviewing such risk reports, which is, and I want to do that. Why? Because that will make me faster in reviewing them. It will make me faster in also providing a quote to a customer, and will make my quotes more accurate, because I want to reduce human error. I want to retain knowledge in the company in case my engineers leave, right? So there's a certain set of goals that I have. Now, what do I need to do if I am the head risk engineer of the company? What do I need to do in order to implement such a thing? Because this is where it becomes complicated, right?
Absolutely.
Where it becomes difficult.
Yeah. So I think any artificial intelligence system which should be interested should always start with the, let's say, the point that actually we're trying to mimic the behavior or the reasoning a person would have in this process. So basically it's about assessment of a risk, right? Now, in large insurance companies, there's also so-called underwriting standards, right? So these are the guidelines at which underwriters need to stick to have a standardized way of assessing risk, right? So if I would like to introduce a system, as we described before, right, a natural language understanding or natural language processing system, which helps the underwriter to assess more quickly, it actually starts with the underwriter, right? So you have to sit down with that person and really try to understand what are the things they are interested in, what is it they are looking for, right?
So capture, in other words, capturing their expertise somehow.
Exactly. So it's all about capturing their expertise in a structured way so that the system could mimic their behavior. Now it's very, yeah.
Is that sorry for interrupting. Is this something that you can automate, basically the capturing of the person's knowledge, or is this an assisted process?
Yeah. So it's actually both. It has both components. On one side, of course, it's an assistant process, right? A kind of business analyst or data scientist can sit down with that person to understand what is it they are looking for, to actually mimic that in the software. But on the other side, you could also go back and see within their backend systems historical data. How were objects in the past rated, right? So you would have the assessment of the last factory and the one before, and you could see according to which criteria was that assessed, right? So this is actually very valuable because there is some kind of historical data which can be used. That is also usually what you would use with machine learning, right? You need some annotated data. You can actually ideally already have some annotated data, or you can go through the process of annotating that data, new ones. But very often, in this case, right, there is not enough data to use machine learning approaches. So also approaches of symbolic reasoning or actually rule-based approaches are very so this rule-based sounds always a bit unsexy, but it's very common and very practical approach in case there is not a lot of data available, or there just can't be, right? You won't have 10 millions of factories to train your system on.
Right. Yeah. Picking up of that, you mentioned the topic, which is not insurance specific. The topic is machine learning versus rule-based.
Yeah.
For many reasons, typically a practical application has both. It uses both a machine learning approach and a rule-based approach, because the rules need to be there, even because sometimes you can't just extract the rules from the data. And if you're talking about regulations, then these need to be rules. It cannot just be based on past human decisions. So this is clear. It's not always clear to everyone, and in some areas you hear about, machine learning solves everything, but it doesn't. It clearly doesn't. Machine learning without a set of rules that at the very minimum control it or regulate it with a sort of code of conduct and basically keep it within certain boundaries can grow out of control, and this is not what you want, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is a very, very important point. So if you think about decisions which are being taken, right? Let's maybe move on from the underwriting, maybe more to the claims handling side, right? At some point in time, you will have either to accept or to reject the claim, right? If you're not able to explain why a claim was rejected, right, you will lose a lot of trust, right? It will be very hard to sell to the client, and it's gonna be also issues with regulation, as you mentioned, right? So this understandable AI, and I guess we could just discuss for an hour about that topic.
Explainable AI.
Huh? Explainable AI, right? And making it understandable to what were the reasons why a certain decision was taken.
This is worth a dedicated episode, I think.
Absolutely.
The explainable AI. Before we move to the next step in the value chain, to the claims, if you don't mind, that we stick for just a lot longer on the underwriting and the early stage of the value chain. So risk engineering is something you can automate, or at least attempt to automate using AI. What else can you automate in that part of value chain, for example, in underwriting or pricing, or what else can you automate using AI and machine learning?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, there are plenty of things, right? On one side, I would distinguish between getting more insights into your portfolio you have, right? So just including kind of more data sources, right? So imagine health insurance, right? You can include the behavior of a person, right? Like you could try to deduct, are they a smoker or not, based on other data they provide you, right? So I think including more data to have a better assessment of the risk is one aspect. And I think the only way of doing that is automation, because there's just so much data to include in. The other things are just in the efficiency improvement, right, of the actual process. So let me give you an example. If you want to buy a warranty extension for your TV, which costs 500 euro, there's no point in doing a big assessment, right? It's going to be based on a couple of factors, and the process and the decision of if we underwrite that risk, yes or no, can be fully automated, right? If we're discussing about the life insurance, it's a completely different thing, right? It's much longer, much more, let's say, value being
the loss is
much higher, right? So it completely depends on the product, right? And I think this is where it's important to understand that AI is not necessarily going to take the decision away, right? It's just the certain risk appetite and risk awareness about what are the decisions we are willing to just give to an agent, to a machine to take, and what are the ones a human person needs to be involved to take the final judgment, because it's also at the end always going to be the responsibility of a person, even if an AI system takes a wrong decision. Let's call it a wrong decision.
I saw somebody posting on LinkedIn yesterday something that had been posted in the early 1980s, a quote from someone saying, you can't machines should not be taking decisions because machines are not liable, right?
Exactly.
And this is kind of still holds true today, even though many decisions are being made nowadays by machines, and actually the companies that own the machines are the ones liable, not the machines themselves, but they are being taken. And this is obviously has its problems, because machine learning models have biases of all kinds that need to be looked at. So, okay. Let's try to move on to the next step of another step in the value chain, to that claims process. So, in a claim for a person who doesn't know what that is when a company or a person wants basically to be compensated by the insurance company for a loss. And what are things that we could do, or an insurance company can do, to automate that process or parts of that process using AI?
Yeah, I think I mean, this is the earliest process within insurance companies which was looked into, well, how to automate with AI, right? Because it's also one of the most cost-intensive ones for the insurer, right? So let's maybe take an example. Let's go back to the example of the house, right? If the house burns down, right, at some point in time, there's going to be the first notice of loss, right? This is the one moment where the file gets opened with the insurer, right? So you would notify the insurer that there was this accident, the house burned down, and this opens the file, right? So I think the first touch point here with the person, it depends a bit, right? This could either be by phone, or it could be that you send an email or speak to your agent, or potentially even to the broker who sold you or who brokered the insurance, right? So depending on that channel and also what it is about, right, the channel is going to be different, right? So in case of the house, it would most probably be through either phone. If we're speaking about the TV, right, the warranty extension, it's going to be probably through a website, because the cost of let's say also the profit can be made on that particular contract is so low that having a human intervention is actually just going to be too expensive for the insurance company. But then there is the second step. So at some point in time, the insurer is going to ask questions about, okay, what exactly happened, how did that go, and also what are the costs involved, right? So they can decide that it is grace to send an expert to the location to assess what happened, right? The expert is going to do two things. I think on one side it's for fraud detection, right? Like, I mean, was there potentially a fraud? And the second aspect is, of course, well, assessing the price of the loss, right? So what does the insurance company have to pay, and what is it responsible for paying? So I think here there are already various elements which can be taken, right? I think the fraud aspect is one of it. So is there a certain pattern?
So you can automate fraud detection using AI?
Yes, absolutely. So
Yeah.
I think how that is usually
else?
done. Yeah, so fraud detection using AI. I think also the assessment. So for instance, if you think about agricultural insurance, right, in some areas, satellite images are being used, right, to assess, well, was there a flooding at that particular place, right? Nobody will send an agent to that field to see if there was flooding, but aerial images of that region will be taken by the insurer to assess, well, was there some flooding in the area the farmer claimed, for instance. And this is where AI come in, right? So an AI model can detect, okay, well, the color is blue, brownish, kind of, this was a flood, right? Same goes for drought or the like.
Okay.
So,
all right. So try to pick up of some of the things that you said. So automating claims, you can automate fraud detection, you can automate the actual assessment, the verification of the facts, right? The fact verification in the claim. Some things that are kind of also usually done are, for example, well, claims are often, the media that you use to file a claim is often like a letter, a pile of paper that process itself of opening up the letter, extracting the relevant information, triaging it, routing it to the right department. It's something that can also be automated, right? The decision whether should I look at it or not can be automated, because if the claim fulfills some certain criteria, you can automate. You could also almost automate it end to end, or at least you could route it to accounts payable and get it to be paid immediately. So there's a lot of things that can be done in the claims management process to automate using AI. Anything else that you could think of around automating the claims process using AI?
Yeah. So, I mean, what is interesting here is, for instance, if you look at the settlement of a claim, right, this is not going to be done in a day or two, right? But usually this process takes some time, right? So the experts will send in documents over the course of time. Maybe the insurer, they collect additional information. So there's an input channel to the insurer adding more and more information to that, right?
So you're talking about complex cases, right? Not simple cases like a car accident.
Exactly, like complex cases, right? So additional information will be added, right? So it's very interesting for the insurer to know, well, there is a new information coming in, which case does this belong to, right? So the kind of routing, triaging functionality. There's also already an interesting thing of detecting, well, is a new email which is coming in, is that actually a first notice of loss, or is it just adding something to an existing one, right? Why is that important? Insurance companies, they very often have SLAs on how quickly they need to open up a new filing, right? And very often there's also SLAs around, well, okay, how quickly can we help the person, right? If your house burns down, it's clear it's gonna be at minimal a certain amount of money the company needs to pay, right? So you may get a payment upfront, right, to already help you in the misery moment you are like in.
Right.
And then the experts come, and it's going to take a couple of weeks or months to provide additional information until the final settlement amount is clear. And then there's going to be a difference in payment, right? Is going to be made. So this helps the person should to deploy capital quickly so that they can start renovating or rebuilding, or in case of flooding, for instance, adding, let's say, pumping out the cellars and refurbishing, etc. So that's they can go on. Yeah.
So if an insurance company wants to start automating processes using AI, what are the things they need to take into account, like pitfalls, do's and don'ts that you could think of in your experience?
Yeah. So I think here it all starts with data, right? So it's very important that they can tap into the data sources they already do have at let's say, within their organization to base decisions on that data. This may sound as a no-brainer or a trivial thing, but it's very often not so easy, right? Information is scattered across the organization. Maybe they even don't know that you as a single client have a couple of policies, right? That they belong to the same person. So data is usually, or data foundations is usually an issue.
Getting the data right is a good first step.
Yeah, getting the data right is essential.
How do I know what data do I need to get right, and how do I know what's important? What should I get right first? How can I find out?
Yeah. So I think any kind of information on which you want to base decisions, right? That is really key. There's also let's say, data which you would just not tap into historically because you could just not process it at scale, right? So imagine a lot of paper-based filings of historical claims, right? It may be very valuable to scan those and to tap into this information to better price future deals, because you have your loss histories and you can understand better the type of portfolio you have. So it's making data available, right? It's making also data accessible to your organization, to the underwriters working on it, to claims people. And it's also about offering a better client experience by, okay, you call your insurer, they know all the products you have, they know all the risks, they avoid re-asking questions for a new policy because you have already answered that 3 times on other policies you may have, right? So there is really the data foundation, I would say, start getting right, yeah.
So if you should get something right, you should get the data right, because without that, you can't really do AI.
Yeah. Okay. So it's going to be rubbish in, rubbish out, right? Like if the foundation is not adequately, it's going to be very hard to make good estimates from.
So what about the don'ts? What should insurance company not do if they want to introduce AI?
Yeah. So I think they should not just try to do that top down, right? Just saying, okay, now we do AI and then expect this to magically happen. I think it's going to be also a change process, which has to be top down, but also bottom up, right? The top down part I consider as there needs to be the right funding from the organization, from a key decision maker who says, okay, there's going to be budgets to deploy, right, to work on this. But it's also change management process which has to happen bottom up, because potentially the way how people will work within that organization is going to be different from what it used to be, right?
Okay. How different?
Yeah. So let's for instance take the person who is doing claims handling, right? I think in the past maybe they went through a lot of documentation and a lot of cases, and they spend a lot of time interacting with the client on the phone, etc. Now that's potentially going to be different, because information is going to be accessible through their website. There is self-settlement of claims, right? So there is this person who used to work on actual cases may be involved in reviewing training data, in seeing that whatever goes into these models is better, that the data which the company keeps is better. So it's going to be a bit of a refocusing of what they do, right?
Okay, makes sense.
So, yeah.
So if I'm would I need to worry if I'm an insurance professional that I'm going to be replaced by a machine?
That's a common fear, and I think that fear has been around for quite some time. But I think it's gonna just, as I mentioned, the way of working is gonna change, right? I think
my job is not going to disappear.
The job is not going to be disappearing, but it's going to be different, right? New products will emerge. It's also important to see that, I don't know, like this, for instance, the automation is not removing anything, but it also has the potential of giving more value adding services, right? Doing better user experience, allowing to get a better insight into the risk portfolio, right? But of course, those fears exist and they have to be taken seriously, right? So this is why I'm saying a proper change management process within the organization is key, that you also explain to the workforce what this transformation is about, to actually take those fears, right? And to show what the new insurance processes with AI can look like. I'm afraid if that is not properly managed, right, it's going to be, let's say there won't be internal buy-in. Maybe the second don't, if I may, right, is also the following one. I think don't try to, as an insurance company, think that you can get it all right in the first place. I think it's an iterative process, right? I think it has, don't try to do it alone, right? Really speak to experts in artificial intelligence, in automation, right? Which can help you pick the right technologies to solve your problems, right? So that you as an insurer, like us, right? So exactly. So that you actually can focus on innovating on the insurance product, right? And giving a great customer experience to your clients.
So we are reaching the end of our episode. I'm going to try to summarize what we discussed until now. So we talked about the insurance value chain that goes from, has several steps. We touched essentially two. One of them was the underwriting, the pricing. So basically the insurance part, where you insure something, you for example, so you need to evaluate the risk, you need to price the risk, and then you need to close a contract with the insured. That's one part. And we talked about automation of that using, for example, automating the risk engineer processes using natural language processing or machine learning techniques. We talked about automating the underwriting, the pricing and underwriting decisions based on data, right? And new data. There's not just historical data, but it's also other data. So in the other part of the value chain, in claims management, we discussed also the possibility of automating the document process, automating the decision making using AI, and data as well. That is not just historical, but you made the example, if there is a flood happening in a agricultural property, you actually, in order for you to check the facts, you go and check the weather data, or you go to check the satellite pictures instead of just interviewing the person or visiting the property. So and that information can be used for automation. There's, as we know, there's a number of other places where we could talk about this, and this could be a much longer conversation. But since we are running out of time, what is the future, right? What is the next big thing in insurance process automation? Where do you think that the competitive advantage for insurance companies is going to be?
Yeah. So I think let's first start with the good news. The good news is that the insurance market is growing, right? Premium premium amounts are growing over time, right? There's going to be more insurance in the future and more, let's say, the cake is getting bigger, right?
There's new risks like cyber.
Exactly. There's
that
new
are
risks
emerging. Yeah.
There's also a lot of people for the first time buying health insurance, for instance, right? So the cake is getting bigger, right? I think on one side, one of the challenges for insurers is actually to adopt technology, right? There's also a lot of new clients coming, like the Generation Z and the Millenniums, right? Have different expectations from their insurance company
for digital, basically.
For digital, right? Maybe that is going to be very important that the insurance companies also adjust to these new clients, right? To serve them in the way they want to be served. So I think this is one of the big challenges, right? And then one of the very interesting topic for insurers, and we touched a bit on it in the discussion, is like if you buy a car today, right? Is the insurance already going to be part of your car, right? Do you buy it with the product?
Mm-hmm.
Who is responsible in case the car has a crash? And let's think about autonomous driving, for instance, right? So like, is it the manufacturer of the car? Is it the person driving? Is it the developer of the algorithm? So insurance is getting more complex.
And it's new products, right? So nowadays you might not buy a car anymore. You might buy mobility instead.
Exactly.
And that's insured, for example. So you don't get insurance of the car, but you can insurance in case you don't, you can't move from A to B, and then that's insured, not the car itself.
So in essence, I think it's product innovation, and that is only possible through technology in insurance space. Mm-hmm. My feeling is that in the last 5 years, there was more innovation in insurance than in the 15 years which were before, right? So I think it's accelerating. There's a lot of startups, or let's call it like insurance companies like Lemonade, who start digital first, right, from scratch, who are a bit disrupting the existing players. Yeah. So I think it's going to be very interesting on how to deal with technology and to adapt to the ever-changing world, which is changing faster and faster.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also excited. I think insurance has a lot of potential, right? And there is a huge insurance gap around the world. So there's a lot of people who need protection, a lot of businesses that need protection, and that are not protected yet. There are new risks. So I agree, the market is growing, and there's so much to do. So thank you, Marc.
Thank you
for joining our episode. And thanks everyone for listening. Don't forget to subscribe our channel. Press the button below, and please like our episode as well. You will also find links to our Spotify, Apple, and Google podcasts in the description of the video below. And stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you.